Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. This is the new Wednesday crew. Durst, Owen, Bill. It's good to see everybody. This is sure.
Oh, you're cutting in and out. But Jim hit the nail on the head here, folks. It's great to be here with Durst and Owen, our usual Wednesday night crew. We want to thank everybody for joining us. If you missed our quarterback series on Friday nights that I did with Anthony and Durst and many guests like Sam Teets, go back and check that out. But we're gonna dive a little deeper tonight. We're gonna go into quarterbacks that we think are day one, day two guys in the 2026 class that you could pretty much either guarantee they're coming out because they're a senior or a underclassman that, really good year he comes out. But before we get too inundated, Owen, how are you doing on Wednesday night?
I'm doing great. I'm a little distracted, Bill. I never realized you had the beam of light from the spaceship from Independence Day in the back corner of your bedroom there. So I'm noticing it for the first time, and I'm like, what is that?
Yeah. Don't if I get abducted, just roll with it. I will broadcast from the spaceship and teach them about comps in a far off planet. Durst, how are you on this lovely Wednesday night?
Pretty good. So, a comp between a Klingon and a
What's the comp for Captain Kirk? I don't know if we can get into that one right now, but tonight we're going to talk about quarterbacks, day one, day two. I wanted to start off with the conversation around about a first round grade, because we hear it all the time in the draft media. This quarterback's got a first round grade. This guy's got a first round grade. So we'll kind of go round robin around the room. And Durst, I'll start with you. When you're looking at a quarterback and they get that first round grade from you, what constitutes that? What boxes are you looking to have checked for a first round grade?
Well, first of all, I'll say, for a quarterback, I'm not necessarily looking for an immediate starter. With most other positions, I'm looking for a guy that's going to be starting very early in his career, if not by, day one. Maybe make some exceptions for a guy here or there, depending on traits versus production or even like injury situations. But with quarterbacks, I really don't mind him sitting a year. I like to give him the feet wet a little bit, but I don't mind taking a guy that needs a little bit of development. Now, early on in the process, I talked a little bit about my scoring system, and I didn't want to rehash that every episode that we did, but I'll kind of take that and roll with that. So there's 10 different categories I'm trying to grade the quarterbacks on. One is accuracy, which in that bucket, I'll include the hold, touch, timing, and anticipation. Can you hit the tight window? Can you hit a receiver in stride? Can you layer it between the linebacker and the safety? So basically, we're just kind of looking at ball placement. And so I'm rating each of these from a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the best. My second category is arm strength, inclusive of velocity and range. Can you threaten all levels of the field? The third one that we mentioned the other day, which I forgot where this had came from, but somebody said it was from Corey Kinnan, was arm arrogance. So how conservative are you? Are you willing to push the ball downfield? Do you avoid congested, in traffic or tight window or middle of the field throws? Or are you check down Charlie, or are you going to go ahead and let it rip downfield and try to fit between three defenders? Now, my fourth category is mobility. So it's inclusive of rushing production and ability. It's not all about production, but sometimes just, being able to project going forward. The fifth one is sack avoidance. So it's primarily looking at pressure to sack ratios, but pocket presence, pocket management, and the understanding that a sack can be a drive killer and ultimately sometimes a game killer. Turnover
Sound like Anthony
avoidance.
Russo on that one.
Yeah, we had a long conversation about that one.
Yeah.
So now I get to turnover avoidance, and I do include fumbles. So to me, interceptions aren't as bad as fumbles because the interception might be 30 yards this way. The fumble might be 10 yards behind the line of scrimmage going that way. So there could be a 40-yard difference easily between a fumble and where the defense gets the ball versus the interception where the defense gets the ball. Next one's playmaker or improvisational ability. So your ability to create when the play breaks down. So the Pat Mahomes trait, I guess. Vision and decision, so field vision, decision making, processing speed, post and pre-snap awareness, spatial recognition, decision making, full field progressions, all that I kind of put into the whole vision decision. Finally, again, a little bit into mechanics. Now, I'm not going to say I'm like a mechanics guru, but I do tend to not favor the big looping, long deliveries, and I just like to see some marrying between the eyes and the feet, and a good delivery and release. And then finally, just a kind of a garbage bucket of intangibles, which I think a lot of people might just think, okay, is this a good leader? And it's maybe not as simple as that. I really want to see the it factor. I want to see a guy that's got poise and mental toughness. And is he clutch? When the game's on the line, are you going to be able to take charge and lead your team to victory? So like a Drew Alar, who's not really done a good job of that in his career. He's done good in some games where he's facing the lower teams, but when he's facing the big game on the big stage, he doesn't really great when it comes to the intangibles. So I'm really looking at all of these categories when I'm trying to determine who I think is going to be a first round pick. So I know that was a long, convoluted answer, but I kind of wanted to take the opportunity to explain my process as it is this summer.
Yeah, no, I loved it.
Yeah. So, Owen, what factors are important to you for a quarterback that you would grade for day one or day two?
Yeah, kind of the piggyback back off of what Durst was saying. I also have a 10 different category grading scale where a lot of the same things that he covered, I also have as individual skills, maybe under different wording. 8 of them are out of 10 points, and then there's 2 of them, one of which I take away one of the maximum points and give it to the other category. Basically, I decide which one I think is least deserving of like where they can get extra bonus points at or extra ground to gain, and another one where I feel like that trait specifically translates a bit better, especially earlier on in the quarterback's career. So the 8 categories that have that are just your normal standard out of 10 would be processing, functional athleticism, pocket manipulation, so being able to maneuver it, handle the pressure by finding areas to escape to and not being able to just take the sacks. Arm mechanics and footwork, which I feel like are some things that can be independently graded on. Sometimes guys have them married together, which usually can up their grade pretty well. And then those are usually the same quarterbacks that don't have accuracy issues, but other ones you can definitely see some different things there. And specifically with arm mechanics, I factor a lot into not only just their normal throwing motion, but how comfortable they are using different arm angles and having kind of that natural arm talent to be able to fit into some different windows, especially when they're under duress and under pressure. The poise, which is kind of similar to what Durst was talking about, where it's like the light shining the most, but I also factor in there is their ability to stand in, take the hit, be a leader, and deliver while not just under pressure of like the game situation, but also under pressure literally when it comes to what's happening on the field and what's coming up on them specifically. So I factor that a bit into that. Decision making, which is going to be more so the turnover-worthy plays, ability to have options in front of them and pick the right one or be able to make the right decision that doesn't put their team behind the ball, and the accuracy, which covers mostly touch, timing, anticipation, things like that. The 2 categories that I switched around and bumped 1 point off the top end of it, then gave it to the other one. The one that's out of 9 points is arm strength for me, which is, again, velocity, distance, ability to hit all levels of the field. For me, arm strength is more so a barrier that quarterbacks need to pass to be able to be an NFL level talent. Now, you're not going to be a first round level quarterback unless you're in the kind of the upper echelon pushing the max points there. But I did feel like that you can take a point off the top end of there because the difference between a guy who can throw it 60 to 70 yards as opposed to 50 to 60 yards at his top end of his frame is he can get that ball without having to put his whole body into it. Regardless, it's not going to matter that much of a difference when evaluating how good of a quarterback they're going to be as long as they can get the ball to each level with some good velocity. I didn't really factor too much into that. And I took that point off the max top for arm strength and moved it to out of structure ability. So improvisation, being able to work. A lot of these quarterbacks in these college systems, they don't have the best talent around them, or they have to play against high level competitions. It's how are you able to, when the play breaks down and you aren't able to work within that offense that your coaches try to put you into, can you still execute? And that's going to translate a lot to when they get to the NFL, when the play speeds up. Again, maybe you're on a team that doesn't have the greatest talent around you. Are you still able to go out there and just have some natural instincts at the position to be able to go out there and make plays and find the right player when you're having to roll out, when you're having to escape the pocket, when you're having to make plays on your own. How much can you be kind of that X factor? How much can you run an entire offense and make the right play, even if the guys around you aren't to your level of talent or instincts on the football field?
Okay.
Period different than Durst and Owen.
Yeah, so mine's pretty much similar to them, but I have a six box checklist that I work through. Starting with number 1, I'm looking at your physical traits, and that includes your arm talent. You know, do you have NFL velocity, deep ball ability, arm arrogance, like Durst talked about? I'm looking at your athletic ability. What's your mobility in and out of the pocket? Can you extend the play? Are you a run threat, depending on your scheme? Your size is a big thing. You know, we talk about these size outliers. You know, typically you want to look 6'2", 6'1" plus, somewhere in there. 210 and up. Some exceptions exist, but they are exceptions to that rule. And then obviously also looking at your mechanics and your footwork and those physical traits. And then the second one is mental processing and your football IQ. How are you with full field progressions and post snap adjustments? How are you with anticipation, throwing before the receiver hits the break? You know, how's your decision making? Are you making a lot of low turnover worthy plays, you know, especially under pressure? And then also pre-snap recognition. Do you see it before you snap the ball? The third one is, how does your production and your traits translate to the NFL? So do you win from the pocket consistently, or are you constantly having to get outside the pocket to win? Can you create when a protection breaks down? You know, is your game translatable to an NFL system, or is it like an Ole Miss system where we saw last season with Jackson Dart that's not translatable to the NFL? The next one, I call it leadership and intangibles, but it's mainly composure. You know, when the lights are on bright, how do you handle pressure? How do you live in the big moments? This is true. Still looking for that many eons later. Probably still will be looking for it because I'm not drafting them. They're not letting me in the draft room, Ryan. Great call. But that's the big one with leadership and intangibles. Then the fifth one I add in is a projection and ceiling. So for me, first round quarterbacks don't necessarily need to be polished, but I need a runway to becoming a franchise starter. I need to see potential. You know, if you're younger, 2 years old versus 24 and 25, I'm going to take the younger guy. High-end traits with development needed. That's another one. It's projection and ceiling. And then the sixth one is scheme fit and positional value. For me, quarterbacks get a slight push up the board because they are quarterbacks. They play the most important position in football, but also scheme fit. If I have a quarterback that can run a West Coast offense in his sleep, and I have teams that need quarterbacks that run that style of offense, it's going to get pushed up the board because he's shown the ability to control that offense as well. Some things that, you know, typically will prevent a guy from getting a first round grade for me. Great stats in college, but average traits to those stats. So limited arm strength, limited athletic ability, poor under pressure, slow mental processing, scheme dependent production, RPO heavy runs, one read systems, outliers in either weight, height, or both, injury concerns, health concerns. All in all, to wrap it up, when I say quarterback, that is a quarterback that has the talent to be a long-term starter, ideally a top 10 to 13 quarterback in the NFL. They don't have to be an immediate starter. Like I said, I'm the type of person when I assign a first round grade, I need to see the runway. If I see there's a path, like for example, an Aiden Childs, I see a path to him being a top 10 to 13 starter in the NFL, but it may take a year to 2 years to get there. That's a first round graded guy for me. Whereas if I have a guy like Garrett Nussmeier, he's got some of the tools, he's got some of the intangibles, but he's got an outlier in size. So he doesn't have that first round grade for me. So that's kind of the 6 boxes that I look to check when I'm looking for a first round graded quarterback.
I think I heard from Bill, Durst and Owen. I didn't hear it from you. Was there anything on your grading scale that you will favor a 21-year-old over a 25-year-old? Does
Go ahead,
age
Owen.
factor in?
Go ahead, Owen. I'll change it.
For me, not particularly, especially with how the current landscape in the NFL is you're getting players that are lasting longer, especially the quarterback position. You're getting guys that are mid to late 30s consistently, especially at this position. And for me, it actually can help out the grade a bit more because typically you'll have these guys who are older prospects. You'd hope by that point they are understanding processing, they have their mechanics down a bit more. There's less of a need to fix up some things. They should be closer to a day one starter than not. Now that can also work against them, that if those mechanics and those processing are still off, it's going to be, I'm not going to give them as much benefit of the doubt when it comes to giving them points there, or like when I have a player young like Aiden Childs, who I'll give more leeway and give more points to his processing, even though he's not a great processor right now. Him being super young and playing in a super pro heavy offense at like Michigan State and still being able to make correct reads and make good decisions with the football, I will give him more of the benefit of the doubt that he's going to get better with his processing, that he's already handling so much so quickly that I already am enjoying that, as opposed to a player who would be, I can't think of one off the top of my head right now that's coming to an example, that was an older player, but still struggled with the processing and reading of defenses and making the right decisions. Like, yeah, maybe he's super talented, but the fact that he can't continue to improve when it comes to that, there's not a lot you don't want to give him that much benefit of the doubt with that specifically, because then it's like, okay, he couldn't get it with 4 or 5 years in college. How long is it going to take for him to get it at the NFL level when it's faster and you need to kind of hurry up and pick it up and get out there for our team?
To me, that would imply then that you're looking at the quarterback's age before you evaluate them, so that you know how to score them. Correct?
I think it definitely will come to a factor. Sometimes I like to usually throw on a game first when I'm watching them, and then I'll kind of fill out that information. But sometimes when I do throw it on there, yes, it can influence how when I'm looking at their game, I will still point out objectively, like, okay, this was a good decision, this was a bad decision, this is the correct read, this was a good timing with this processing. And then when I go to put the grade in after watching that film, like, okay, I saw this or that, it was good or bad. And then, okay, through the filter of their current trajectory, how long they've been a starter, how long they've been playing, what their age is, what is my opinion on that change when filtering it through that lens?
So my side is that I've kind of changed a little bit. To borrow a term from fantasy football, I tended to prefer early breakouts, and in some degree still do at the running back, wide receiver, and tight end positions, but not as much at quarterback now. I would it wasn't so much about the contracts or the fact that quarterbacks can play to the 36, 38, 50 years old in Tom Brady's case. But it's more about the fact that if you can dominate as an 18-year-old in the Big Ten, SEC, or even a lesser conference, to me that shows that you really have an ability that's God given. That it's not something that's just being coached or whatever, or scheme oriented. So now I would say that again that this has changed a little bit. I've seen enough redshirt sophomores come into the league and strike out, not do very well. I think Sam Darnold was a redshirt sophomore. Jameis Winston was a redshirt sophomore. So there's been enough of those examples that have come in that I've begin to change my tune a little bit, and kind of like a guy that's got some experience on him. Now, if you take like a Garrett Nussmeier, I'll say that he's a guy that's got 1 year starting plus 1 game, and he's older, so that's got me a little bit. Yeah, we'll get in him a little bit later, but a guy that's older but then hasn't been able to get on the field has me a little bit more concerned as well. So I think there's a happy medium for me. So I don't necessarily like I was a big Tyler Shaw guy. One, because he was older, but two, the reasons he was older is because he got hurt a lot. And so some people might say, well, that's the reason he's still there. He would already been in NFL. But I'm like, yeah, but he got hurt a lot. So in my scoring system, I don't have injuries, I don't have size, and I don't have age. But I'm kind of subjectively taking all that in consideration.
So backstage, about a minute before we went live, we discussed where some of the different quarterbacks are graded. So the primary focus of this podcast is to discuss in depth wide receivers that at least one of Durst, Owen, and Bill has a day 1 or day 2 grade on, and that list is primarily 4 quarterbacks: Drew Lar, Garrett Nussmeier, Cabe Klubnik, and then possibly Miller Moss. Those are guys that we know that are in this draft class because they are seniors. They will be out of eligibility, and they've graded high enough to be day 1 or day 2. Owen, what were your thoughts on Miller Moss?
Yeah, he was one of the guys that got to kind of on the later side, and he's an interesting case study because specifically going from the USC system to Louisville, I'm really curious to see how he projects to that, because I didn't ever think like he was a top of the line athlete specifically, especially watching his USC's offense from like a watching perspective, not just the scouting report. I think I did appreciate it a bit more as I went back and broke down the all 22. And he did come in and was able to execute a Lincoln Riley offense, so you've seen be able to work through and be one that projects to the pro league, whether it was Baker or Kyler Murray, Caleb Williams. We've seen a ton of players come through that system and execute it and then move on to the next level. For me, I think Miller Moss wasn't the best when it came to executing that offense as flawlessly as it was with those other quarterbacks who obviously went first overall. They have much more talent than that. So I think for me, I don't know if the natural talent is there with Moss. And I don't know if the top end arm strength is there, if the top end athleticism, like you're not going to see any like super game breaking stuff. And which is why it's curious for me when he goes to Louisville, where they've that's their brand is mobile quarterbacks. Them and like Virginia Tech that's constantly like those are the teams that take these quarterbacks and to have legs. That's an automatic dimension to their offense. And I'm curious to see if Miller Moss can unlock a bit more with his legs there. That may bump him up a bit more for me. So I don't currently have him as a day 1, day 2 guy, but I think if he's able to go to Louisville, show a bit more off script playing, some more of that natural X factor that we talked about earlier, as well as unlocking more of his footwork and maybe also being able to show that he can work in a different offensive passing system just as well as he was at USC. I do think that could definitely bump him up to one of those like developmental or like fringe starting type quarterbacks for me.
Did you have a day 1 or day 2 on Miller Moss?
Sorry, did you call me or Bill?
Yeah, I did. So I said,
think
Durst, do you have a day 1 or day 2 on Miller Moss?
So I have him as a fringe. I have him as a round 3, round 4 guy. So basically a fringe top 100 guy. So I can absolutely see the path. I'm a pretty big believer in the Braum brothers and their ability to develop quarterbacks, especially with the Tyler Shocks. No, not Shubs. What was his name?
Shuck.
Shuck.
Tyler Shuck.
Tyler Shucks. So I can see the vision, but I definitely see that there's a lack of physical talent. So in my scoring system, he gets pretty poor grades in mobility, arm strength, and what was the other one? He got kind of a poor grade on me for. Actually, arm arrogance. I kind of gave him a poor grade, which probably directly has to do with his somewhat lack of an arm strength. But so let me get back to Moss here. Okay, so I say Moss loses accuracy on the move, and his RPMs drop off substantially when he doesn't have a firm base. So he can throw some hard passes, but I feel like he has to have a firm base, has to have his legs underneath him. He's not a guy that's just going to flick his wrists and is going to go sailing downfield. So it's not that he can't make these throws, but it's like he's got to have this perfect circumstances with the protection and have his legs underneath him to really be able to make that. I feel like the RPMs really drop off if he doesn't have that. So it's not so much the range, it's just how quickly can the ball get from point A to point B. Undersized, lacks play strength and athleticism to escape pressure, and then the fact that he lost his starting job at USC. I know some people said he was a scapegoat and kind of maybe wasn't really the person at fault, but he he's entering his 5th season of college football with just 9 career starts, so that's a little bit scary. But I say excellent field vision and processing, throws with good touch time and anticipation at his best when he can step up in this pocket when given time in a clean pocket. Pitt Moss can be pinpoint accurate and is able to fit the ball between multiple defenders, nearly automatic on the layups, and he can throw dimes on anything up to 15 yards, can drop it in the bucket in longer passes, and there are flashes of off-platform and off-script playmaking abilities. So I think, how he develops in his fifth and final season under the Braun brothers in Louisville that's going to be the story between him being a maybe a later day 3 pick and a top 100 pick for me.
So, Bill, I think of the 4 of us, you were going to be the highest on Miller Moss. So tell us about Miller Moss.
So with Miller Moss, the conversation starts obviously at his size. You look, he has that prototypical, I won't say prototypical, but he doesn't have a size outlier. This is 6'1", 205, 210. The big thing is when you don't have those elite physical traits in terms of arm talent, right? Like I talked about, the guys where you've got to be a throw with anticipation. You've got to be able to throw with accuracy. You've got to be able to do those types of things. The first thing is his release. It's lightning quick. It stands out on tape consistently, and it's repeatable. It gets the ball out fast, which is what you need if you don't have that top flight arm. You need the ball to get there quickly. He also processes defensive looks very quickly in post snap processing. Like you watch that LSU game versus USC, he went through it what looked like 4 reads in almost 3 seconds. It was lightning quick. He shows an advanced understanding of leverage and reach and can put the ball away from defenders to where his guys can get it, but he doesn't have to force it in there. For me, you take all of that and then you have the scheme fit conversation like Durst alluded to with the Braun brothers. This offense with Braun, they've done wonders for a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL. Tyler Shuck, Aiden O'Connell, Brian Braun, of course. There is a track record of success for this offense. And even like a guy like Tyler Shuck, who had some wheels and mobility, they wanted him to lean more on winning from the pocket. He had his legs. He could get outside the pocket and move, but they wanted him to win from the pocket. For me, Miller Moss is my 80th overall prospect. So right there in between rounds 2 and 3. Reminds me an awful lot of Aiden O'Connell. This is a guy, when you look at him, he doesn't have the top flight arm or the top flight physical traits, but he checks the other boxes, which for me, it's one of those things as I'm looking at a first round grade and then slowly sliding down the board. Okay, I don't have elite physical traits. Then I need to see quick mental processing. I need to see a lightning quick release. I need to see the ability to win from the pocket. I see all of those things with Miller Moss. The drawback is the arm strength's just adequate. And it's not like he can't make certain NFL throws, but it's throws 20-yard out routes deep. You don't want him making those because he's gonna have to put some oomph on it to get it there. But if you want a guy who can live in the short and the quick game in the West Coast offense, Miller Moss is a very suitable replacement.
Yeah, and of course, there's different ways that quarterbacks can win. Obviously, the way Lamar Jackson plays and the way, who would be the opposite side? I mean, like a Matt Ryan or whatever. Completely different
Kirk Cousins.
stuff. Yeah. So there's different ways to win, and not everybody's going to have like 10s and 10s and 10s in every category across the board.
Yeah.
This class.
Anybody read lips?
The senior.
Yeah. In and out again, Jim.
In and out. So I was saying, Durst, who is your highest rated quarterback that's a senior?
Oh, let me make sure I got the senior list pulled up here.
Yeah. I would say I've got mine pulled up. I can go if you guys want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so for me, it's Garrett Nussmeier is my highest rated senior. He's right now currently my 20th overall prospect, but an early second round grade because he's got the the arm talent. It's not the strength, it's the talent, it's the release angle. He has touch and timing that he can throw with, shows occasional anticipatory throws, but like when I talked about when I make my first round grades, size is a key component. If you have an outlier size, it is a conversation piece. And we're talking about Garrett Nussmeier at 6 foot flat, 200 pounds. that is outlier size any way you shake it. Now, granted, we've seen outlier size go early in the NFL draft, Baker Mayfield going number 1 overall. So we've seen it, but it's an outlier for a reason. And you don't want the exception to become the norm, especially when you're talking about the most important position in sports.
Bill, where did you get the 6 foot measurement? So I just looked it up again on PFF to make sure I wasn't crazy. So I am listed on 6'2", 200. I know that's not, 200 still light. He definitely looks it, but like for the difference between 6'2" and 6 foot is definitely going to be something that I think could sway that a bit.
Yep. So I have connections. That's 6 foot 20. It's actually 6 foot 203. I just double checked it. 6 foot 203 is a verified measurement out of his LSU camp.
Yeah, and Ryan Roberts from Rise and Draft Twitter handle, he tweeted out quite a few of the, I guess what came from Blusco or one of those where a lot of verified
Blusto and NFS is the two big ones.
So I think I had written his down, and he put like 6'0", 5'8", to 205 with 9-inch hands.
Yeah, and that's the other concern that we haven't even touched on is hand size. 9-inch hands is small hands for a quarterback. I mean, we had Joe Burrow have that same hand size conversation because obviously smaller hands means you're going to struggle to grip the ball. He's not going to see as much of it because he plays in Louisiana, so it's not like it's super cold and super snowy. Yes, there's torrential downpours in Death Valley, but that's a conversation piece. He has, for me, it's outlier size, but if he were 6'2", 215, he'd have a first-round grade for me, but I can't in good faith give a first-round grade. And for what it's worth, when I did the 2018 class, Baker Mayfield did not have a first-round grade for me back then either. He was right about the same range I had Nussmeier in the 20s to 30s.
Now, of course, speaking of like Baker Mayfield, it might also be a good time. I know at the beginning of this series we talked about this, but obviously none of these quarterbacks are finished projects. And of course, the Baker Mayfield, I think a lot of people had Baker Mayfield as a 5th-round pick in the summer before he was the number 1 pick. Even if I remember right, even around December, a lot of people were not really taking Kyler Murray seriously, partially because they thought he might play baseball, and he wasn't even somebody we really had to pay much attention to until like just a few months before the draft. So obviously Joe Burrow was somewhat of an afterthought going into his season. He was a 1-year starter. So it's just time after time, not only we've seen 1st-round picks, but number 1 picks in the draft that really the summer before, not everybody, we won't say that nobody was taking him seriously, but it wasn't a consensus that this was going to be a top pick. So any of the 30 guys we talked about could have a great year. And even if they don't have great traits, they could work themselves up into to at least top 10 pick of the draft status.
It's actually a really good point because I think Anthony Russo even pointed out that Travis Hunter was 57th on his board last year after summer scouting.
Yep.
Right, and he ended up being the number 1 overall player for Anthony. So, Owen, what did you think of Nussmeier?
So I'm pretty on board with the 2 of these guys. So I've been dabbling around with Newt's, specifically Newt's player positional like multipliers. Because I usually just give a straight up film grade. I don't usually factor in positional value into my grades on the big board. But for right now, without having those fully committed and figured out for myself, I have a like high round 2 pure film grade on Garrett Nussmeier. That's also based on some of the intangibles and stuff like that. So it's not like it's purely film, but like also factoring in some of the physical traits in addition. I do think that we've had QBs in the past that I've graded at the top of the second that like, okay, because of their positional value, I can definitely see them being taken earlier on. And the early returns on me using that positional multiplier has him as a top 10 grade for me after putting in that positional multiplier on him. So if someone was to take Garrett Nussmeier in the top 10, I would be comfortable with that decision. For me, especially now that, yes, that verified size, he's definitely smaller than I thought. I already had him down as someone who has limited upside, but does all of the intangibles and some of the floor-raising things good. So that way you're drafting this guy in the 1st round. You don't want to always factor in how soon he can start into how early you're going to draft him into your but it's going to be something that does factor in specifically if you're a team that needs a fix at quarterback immediately. You don't have an option on the roster, or you weren't able to find somebody in the run up to the draft. So for me, Nussmeier is a guy that if you're a team that is kind of in between transitions right now, but you have a big question at quarterback, you can draft him. He can raise your floor, but you're not going to look at him as somebody who's going to go above and beyond. There's several quarterbacks that if I was like in a position where I'm trying to restart my team, kind of do a rebuild, I'm drafting other quarterbacks over Nussmeier, even though I don't have them graded nearly as highly and they don't have the floor he has, because I think their physical talents surpass him. We're going to cover a couple of those guys in a second. But for me, I think Nussmeier is just physically limited, but has the stuff that he'll be a starting quarterback in the NFL. It's just probably more in that 15 to 25 range as opposed to like getting up above that level at the best.
Yeah, and I don't think I ever answered that, but I have him also as a basically top of the second round kind of guy, sort of in that Derek Carr sort of range, I guess. I said I think last week that my comp for him was Teddy Bridgewater, but in terms of just like draft range, about where the Derek Carrs of the world end up getting drafted. So he scored really good in my scoring system, but then I take that and then I consider other factors. Like I'm not just going off a number in a sense when I rate them. So he scored actually a third in my system, including underclassmen, but only with the top of the second round grade. You say it one more time, buddy?
Yep.
Looking forward to what he thought of Drew Alon. What was your first impression?
Oh yeah, so for me, one of the guys I know who I trust their opinion a lot when it comes to scouting was one of the guys I worked with at UB, who I was friends with previously to that. He was kind of like my outlet for the draft stuff, and I respect his opinion greatly. He's still working over there with them as a scout. He was high on two quarterbacks coming in this time last year of the summer scouting. He was high on Aller and Connor Weigman. Now, one of them fell off earlier on in the season with Weigman, but the Aller hype, I think, is still kind of warranted. Now, when I was watching him, you can see it. Size, arm strength. He did have some games where he was able to throw good processing speed, and then other games where it was kind of falling off. His accuracy and touch, specifically at that UCLA game where he was throwing guys open, specifically on some comebacker routes where he's throwing them before they're even getting into their break, let alone coming out of it. So I do think overall his accuracy and anticipation and touch is something that I appreciated a lot more, especially for a guy who you're looking at his build and his stature, like, okay, he's going to be like this giant rocket arm quarterback. Maybe he's got to rein it in a bit with the accuracy. I think he surprised me with that a bit. For me, it came down to his ability to manage the pocket while having kind of more of a limited athletic ability. So like he was able to sense pressure, but not really get away from it as much as in the pocket presence. Going back to that poise element where like you're talking about him being able to play when the lights are brightest. I watched his game against Notre Dame because I was happily surprised with the UCLA game. And I went and watched the games where it was the pressure. It was at the Boise State game, not really the same level of competition. Didn't want to factor that in too much. But the Notre Dame game, he was just drowning out there. And I especially think for me, despite him being older, the place I have the biggest concern is in his footwork mechanics specifically. Like a lot of his off throws came from him not having a wide base, not stepping into his throws. And especially that Notre Dame game, there was play where he's not even really under pressure. Like he's getting some pressure up the middle and he's in his own end zone and he's like falling over himself trying to get the ball out to the running back in the flat. And there was just a lot of games, even when he was clean in that UCLA game, in the other games where he was playing well, that I was watching like, okay, that's not a wide base. That's not typical footwork. And then you watch those throws. It's like, okay, those are the off throws specifically. So for him being at the level he's at and not being the greatest athlete, having that footwork mechanics down is going to help him a lot. If he can clean that up, I think he's going to be a guy that I'm pushing for being maybe QB1 if Arch Manning comes back, because he has some of that physical talent that Garrett Nussmeier is missing. And I do think because he's been a starter for so many years for Penn State, now he'll be his third year starting. He has some of the intangibles already down and some of the more natural instincts of the position. I just think the specific mechanical issues need to be cleaned up. And if he does, I think he's going to be one of the guys I'm pushing for as top of the draft class.
I'll
Durst,
go first.
that one's you. Yeah, he's kicking it
right.
over to you. What do you see on Drew
So,
Aller?
so there's a difference between, so my scoring system doesn't really allow me to do a lot of projections. The way it's sort of designed, it's like, well, I think this guy's going to do a lot better this next year. It's kind of based on what I'm seeing at this point. So Allen only scored 6 overall in my quarterback scoring system, but he's my number one senior quarterback when I start adding just the subjective and the projection. So what I wrote down is Aller represents what most NFL teams are looking for. He's a traditional pocket passer with clean mechanics and easy arm strength. So easy arm strength, kind of the opposite of Miller Moss, where he's got to have his speed right underneath him. Everything's got to kind of get perfect. He can do great. Throw darts up to 15 yards. But Aller's got easy arm strength, and he flashes some Roethlisberger-like escapability and physicality as a runner. Again, not trying to compare him to Roethlisberger when it comes to this borderline Hall of Fame career, but in terms of at least as a runner, was his escapability to pull away from defenders in the pocket. I think that's what he really reminds me of. He appears to be a quiet leader with solid intangibles, but does not play with the confidence and the poise of an NFL starter at this point in time. He tends to avoid turnovers and sacks, but he also doesn't push the ball downfield or make enough tight window throws. In the end, there's a lot to work with, but a lot that needs to improve. So I have the Roethlisberger as sort of an upside, although, like I said, I mean, passing wise, he's nowhere near. But then I have the downside is like a Sam Arnold. So he might be a guy that, okay, we're going to keep taking a swing at him. The second team, we'll take a swing at him. The third team, we'll take a swing at him. And eventually he may end up sticking around and becoming a long-term starter. So, Bill, what do you have on Allard?
So I'm going to be the lowest. I'm going to be the wet blanket in the Drew Aller club. And there's a few reasons why. So first thing, you guys have hit on it. He's got the size. This is a guy verified at 6'4", 237. So he's got the size. He's got the elite arm talent. He can generate velocity with minimal windup. Durst, you talked about that long release. He doesn't have that. This is a wind up and let it rip type of guy. Does show poise under pressure, being able to keep his eyes downfield and being able to keep his eyes downfield. But he's got some wheels he can move. This is a guy that can move around the pocket. My concern, and this is a big one, quarterbacks, when you get to a certain level, typically it's high school, sometimes it's senior year of high school, sometimes freshman year of college, you normally get some form of private QB training to help you develop your mechanics and help you, kind of further your game. Drew Aller has had that same private QB coach since the 9th grade, and his mechanics still look the way they do. There's still a lot of the off-platform stuff that Owen talked about, a lot of the off-base stuff, especially as a pocket breaks down. At this point in your college career, you're still having these issues, despite the fact that you've consistently tried to work on them. It's either you, and this will sound a little harsh, but you either have it or you don't. And part of it could be maybe he just needs a new quarterbacks coach. Maybe he just needs someone else to show him the way. Part of it, maybe he just isn't there as a quarterback prospect. For me, when I look at it, it seems that the mechanics typically break down on the intermediate stuff, the 10 to 20 yard stuff. That's where a lot of the off-platform stuff comes into play. The problem is in the NFL, that's the most critical area, is the 10 to 20 yard stuff. Defenses are taught to keep things in front of them. So when you're having those mechanics breakdowns, that is a concern. For me, Drew Aller is my 10th rated quarterback on my board, my 95th overall prospect. My comp for him is Blake Bortles, because I could see somebody saying, hey, big arm, big body, athletic, I can fix the mechanics. Let me take a swing. And sometimes it works. Buffalo and Josh Allen is exhibit A of when it works. And there's a lot of times when it doesn't. Blake Bortles in Jacksonville case. That's kind of how I feel about Aller.
Bill, with you taking over for Wednesdays for me until New comes back, I'm glad that I can stay on the same page where I'm just disagreeing with my co-host and we can get into fights. The vibe won't change.
Not at all. No, not at all.
It hurt. I heard the same evaluation. It's just how high do you have it? Like, Bill, I didn't hear you say anything different than Owen or Durst, other than the fact that you're back around 3 versus somebody might be top of round 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think in summer scouting, I think for me, I like to bet on the traits and hope for
Yeah.
some development, and if you don't see it, then hey, drop them to round 5.
Yep. And part of that for me, I was gonna say part of that for me too. I'm with you, Durst. I like to be positive in summer scouting, but also he is a senior. This is his final year. And that's part of where my age comes into play in a 21-year-old versus a 25-year-old curve. If I have a 21-year-old that's just starting to peak in his development curve, if I had Drew Alar with this mechanics and this arm talent at 22, I am absolutely, let's take a first round swing, versus Drew Alar at 24, 25 with these mechanics and this arm talent. I'm less likely to take that swing because I'm going to have to spend a year or two fixing it. By that point, you're 26, 27 years old. And while quarterbacks do play late into their 30s, it's ultimately also 1 year closer to the 30-year-old mark where eventually Father Time's going to catch up and you're going to drop off that development curve.
So my kind of take on him is, as a freshman, as a true freshman, he didn't play or minimal or whatever. And I don't really mind, I think, if I'm a coach, of having an overly conservative guy who's a first year starter. So he started his college career with an FBS record, 311 passing attempts without throwing an interception. So I think once you get to the end of his freshman or sophomore year, his first year as a starter, you kind of see a guy that looked a little overly tentative, a little afraid to pull the string. But if I'm a coach, with a job on the line, I probably want that from a first year starter. And then my second year with him starting, I'm hoping he starts to take a few more chances and he starts developing maybe some chemistry with a guy like maybe say Tyler Warren or something like that. And then I'm hoping by his final year, then he's able to unlock the other weapons and he's able to lift the players around him as opposed to having to rely on, say, like a Tyler Warren. So I think I'm comfortable with his trajectory of going from a maybe overly tentative but really takes care of the ball guy to a guy that's hot and cold in terms of what chances he's willing to take. But I am hoping for this big progression in year 3 as a starter.
Yeah, I think I have Aller towards, so he's below both Garrett Nussmeier and then the player we're going to talk about next. But for me, Aller, he has the physical talents there, so I don't have to teach that. So I want to be a bit more positive with him, and that's why I said, like, if he was able to put together some of the stuff, which is teachable things, like it's not like he's not gonna, he couldn't. I'm not asking him to be able to throw the ball an extra 20 yards downfield or add some more velocity on there that he doesn't really have. I'm more looking to see, okay, can you make some more steady progressions? This is year 3 of you being a starter now for Penn State. Penn State's not typically known for their quarterback development, but like at this point, you're starting for that long. Can you be a player that then, now that you're comfortable in that system playing in it, can you now progress to be a player that now fixes up their mechanics and becomes more of a pro level prospect? And I think the coaches there at Penn State will know that, and his personal trainers will know that, okay, we've got our guy. He took us to the college football playoffs last year, and he's someone that we're going to now focus on maybe developing some more of those pro style or pro level mechanical issues or processing issues. That way we can complete him, because we also want to be putting guys into the league that are going to go that high. So I do think that may be something that the team itself is going to push for. But so, like I said, Aller is lower for me. Nussmeier is the number 1 guy, the guy we're going to talk about here, but he's physically limited. I think the next player we're going to cover in Cade Klubnik is probably that perfect median for what we're talking about when it comes to someone who's able to play in a rhythm of offense like Nussmeier is, maybe not to the level he can, but also still has those physical talents. So if we want to move on to Klubnik here and kind of round out our senior quarterback evals. Bill, what did you think about Klubnik in comparison, at least to these other guys, and just overall right now where he stands in your quarterback rankings?
Yeah, so again, I'm going to be kind of a wet blanket with Cade Klubnik, but also kind of not. Yeah, I'm a little lower on him than most because, you look at the size, 6'1", 204 is the verified size from NFS. He's got a really good deep ball, really good touch with the deep ball. He doesn't have a strong arm per se, but he's got really good arm talent, which you talk about the release angle, you talk about the arrogance, and then you talk about what, Todd McShay on the McShay Show's coined to the LTA, the load to arrival. It gets up and goes. He also is a dynamic athlete, brings some legitimate speed to the position, both in and out of the pocket. Has a release that's quick, it's compact, it's repeatable, which is a big plus at the quarterback position. I don't want to have to try to worry about you repeating your release over and over when the bullets start flying. I want it to be kind of a habit. The big concern for me is obviously the frame. I talked about height, but I also have to talk about weight as well. When you're 204 pounds, we talked about it with Garrett Nussmeier. Can you hold up for a 17-game season, especially when you go to an offense that doesn't have an established offensive line? You look at teams that could pick up at the top of the draft or could need a quarterback, the Saints, the Browns, the Giants potentially, the Dolphins potentially, if they move on from Tua, these types of teams where if you're going to take a quarterback early, they're not going to be fully established in an offensive line. So he's going to get hit. Can he get up and keep going? He also does have some issues with decision-making, especially under immediate pressure. Sometimes he will force a throw in there if he cannot escape. If he's like that, this is going to sound bad. He's like that raccoon in your backyard that you try to corner and get and throw over the fence and get out of your yard. And when you corner him, he just starts freaking out. That's what you see with Cade Klubnik's decision-making. That's not my comp for him. It's not a raccoon. So let me start there. But that's kind of what
Sam Cheats was going to fight you from hearing that.
He is. We had a fight on it on Friday. He disagreed with me, and I understand. Occasionally lock onto his primary read too often, which is understandable, especially when you're under those types of immediate pressure consistencies. But for me, Cade Klubnik is my QB 9, so he's above Aller at the 90th overall position on my board. So right at the day in the round 3 range. Reminds me an awful lot of the BYU version of Zach Wilson. Really good arm talent, really athletic. When everything is clean and nice and prim and proper, he looks like a star. He looks like the number 2 overall pick in the draft. When it's the bullets start flying and you corner him and he can't escape with his athleticism or he doesn't have that outlet, he crumbles and sees ghosts that are not there and the ball starts going scattershot. But enough of me, talking bad about Cade Klubnik. Durst, how do you feel about the Clemson signal caller?
So he actually scored 2 or second in my scoring system, but when I start adding the projection going forward, he ended up finishing 5th, which was a top of the second round draft selection. So I have my upside as a Bo Nix kind of player, and my downside is a Colt McCoy kind of player, and I think he's probably got a little bit more of a narrow ceiling to floor than some players have. So I have Kolupnik as good arm strength, is accurate to the short intermediate levels of the field, more of a distributor than a playmaker, with a lightning fast delivery in the quick game, which is similar to what Bill said with the quick release. Throws a smooth and catchable ball with good touch timing and anticipation. He will look off defenders and to help open throwing windows. He tends to avoid the negative plays, only 6 interceptions and a 15% pressure to sack ratio in 2024. He's also efficient enough as a runner to both extend plays, but also gain free yards when the defenses have their backs turned or playing maybe more of a man coverage, and he's able to make a few yards. Below average size and frame, little to no tackle or sack breaking strength. Tends to stretch you more horizontally than vertically, which gets a little bit more into that Bo Nix type of realm. Passes lack velocity or the ability to reach all levels of the field. I felt like he's had a lot of double taps when going through progressions, and his deeper passes tend to float. Too many panic, poor decisions. Again, kind of similar to what Bill was saying. Too many panic and poor decisions when pressured. I wrote down hand size could be an issue. He's got 22 fumbles over the last 2 seasons. But he's made steady improvements each of the last few seasons, and his upward trajectory seems to be coinciding with Clemson bringing back a loaded team in 2025, including what could be the best receiving crew in the nation. So I really expect a big year of Clay Klubnik. And with that, I think there's a really good chance he could be a first round pick, even though right now I have him as a top of the second. It's probably still in that Derek Carr kind of range.
Yep. Owen, what do you have on the Clemson signal caller?
Yeah, so for just to get that out of the way with it, it's kind of like similar to what Durst and what Bill is saying. I have day 2 grades on all these guys. So Nussmeier, Klubnik, they're all second round grades for me. In a world where positional value didn't exist and there wasn't a demand for quarterbacks, these guys wouldn't be first round picks, at least not tomorrow. But at this point, I could definitely see a pathway for all these guys making it. And for me with Klubnik, yes, I definitely think the frame is going to be an issue. But for the 3 guys we talked about so far, I think he's the best true athlete of all 3 of them. When it comes to where he sits with comparing him to the other 2, he has better arm talent than a guy like Nussmeier, and obviously not up to standards of Allar. He's up there with accuracy. I think for me with Klubnik, while he has the athleticism, he has the ability to escape the pocket. For me, what the big issue I have with his game is he struggles with the pressure, and he has like poor pocket management when it comes to maneuvering a pass rush, especially when the pocket starts to collapse. So again, another thing that's more intangible up top in the mental side of the game that I think can be cleaned up. I'm not super worried about his physical talent. Maybe physicality will able to hold up, but I'm not going to put that much stock into that specifically when I'm looking to grade them. But physically talented-wise, I think he has it to be a first-round quarterback, and I think there's some mental stuff there. There's also times where he has the correct read. You watch his eyes. He has the right place to put the ball, and then he hesitates. He pats the ball, and he misses the window to throw it into, and then he has to then improvise after that and make a different decision because he wasn't able to just trust his arm, grip it, rip it, and throw it into a window. Even though looking back on film, you can definitely see he made the right read there. So for me, he has the athletic upside and the physical talent of like a Drew Allar, while still being a little bit better when it comes to mechanically and some of the stuff mentally that maybe a Garrett Nussmeier has over the 2 of them. So for me, he's like the perfect median between the 2. And I definitely see pathway for all 3 of these guys to be first round picks. Well, meanwhile, I don't think any of them are like perfectly clean projections for that, at least right now. They're not, like I said before, we kind of got into these individuals. The only quarterback I have with a true first round grade is Arch Manning. And then you have a kind of a cluster here with Nussmeier, Klubnik, Allar, and then I also have Childs in that group as well, just because he's kind of underdeveloped compared to these other guys, all 3 of which are seniors. So I do think he is someone that can be a first-round quarterback, but right now I wouldn't. Again, this is another guy that I'm not the one going to be taking a shot on him just because I have some reservations right now with where he is as a player. But we're getting towards the end of it. For Durst and Bill, are there any guys that you want to kind of shout out? I know we covered these 3 because they are the seniors confirmed to be coming out this year, but looking at some of these underclassmen, do you guys have specific guys you're looking forward to seeing that you kind of planted your flag on? Or is there anything or anybody other players that you're wanting to shout out here towards the tail end of this episode?
Well, so I'm a big Sellers guy.
Before the season even begins.
What was that?
Oh, yeah. We're planting flags early, Jim.
Oh, yeah,
We've been planting flags since May 1st.
So I'm a big Sellers guy. So he's number 1. Oh, sorry, he's number 1 on the guys that we were going to talk about as potential first round picks. I think he's the most likely of the redshirt sophomores to come out. I think he probably might be the most likely of the juniors, if we include those guys to come out. So he finished a little lower in my scoring system because we're going to talk about some of his warts. So he ended up scoring 4th in my scoring system, but he's the guy I'm most after Manning. He's my second favorite quarterback. So basically, if everybody came out, Manning would be number one, Sellers would be number two. And again, this is taking a lot of projection into him. So, a prototypical size and frame, excellent arm strength, range, and velocity. His legs will be a weapon in the NFL. He can run quarterback counter, and Sellers can break the tackles and sack attempts of legitimate NFL prospects. About like last maybe October, I put out a clip of him, and he had avoided this on just one play. He had avoided sacks and tackle attempts from Shadur, not Turner, the Shadur Stewart, and then it was Cassius Howell, and then Taurine York. So three guys that are all going to be like high NFL players and are great college players all had a shot at him in one play, and he avoided all three of them. Now he's got good accuracy to me in the short and deeper areas of the field. It is the intermediate area I'm a little bit more concerned about. With just being a redshirt sophomore, Sellers will telegraph throws, and he needs to work on reading defenses, looking off defenders, and going through progressions. He needs to improve his overall accuracy, and generally he has to see it open before he will throw it. He can occasionally be a one read and run, read, and take off runner, and he needs to avoid the negative plays. So as much as I said that he's really good at avoiding sacks and tackles, the problem is he actually took 31 sacks. So there's a little bit of a disconnect in terms of what his traits are and what his actual production is when it comes to that. So 31 sacks is something that is more of a less about his traits, but more about his ability to manage the pocket. So he's got the traits to shake off sacks, but then his eyes will fail him, and his ability to read pre-snap and post-snap will fail him. When I say fail, I mean he was a redshirt freshman last year, first year starter. So basically, redshirt sophomores have a poor track record. It's probably my biggest concern with him. I think everything else will probably work out in his second season as a starter this year. So, Owen, what do you have on Shadur, or not Shadur, Lenore Sellers?
Yeah, I'm a fan of Sellers. I have him in that grouping right after the guys we talked about already today, just because I'm a little more tepid on projecting him, especially coming out this upcoming year. Definitely think, unless he shows some major leaps and bounds when it comes to his intangibles, when it comes to his mentality or mental side of the game, I think he should go back just to kind of buffer out some more things. You covered a lot of what I was going to cover. Rare special type of athlete at the quarterback position, being I have him down here 6'3", 240. I'm sure there's some more recent updated measurables that have him. So, but he's able to move for someone who's measured at 240. The fact that he can move the way he does, and it's incredible. And he has all the arm talent in the world. He can make plays off script. But for me, it's going to be him playing on schedule and playing with throwing anticipation and finding windows that aren't open and clearly obvious for him, because when you get to the NFL, there's going to be disguised windows and underneath coverages that take away those throws that want to bait you into thinking that they are open throws for you. So for me, Sellers would be a player kind of similar to how I viewed Anthony Richardson when he was coming out. I didn't see, fourth overall pick hype, but definitely think because of the physical traits, you're going to have guys reaching up to grab him there. If you're going to take him, you got to grab him more towards maybe the later end of the first round. If he does go in the first, maybe top end of the second. And then maybe the Jalen Hurts range. If you're looking at the Lamar Jackson pick, the last pick of the first, you're banking on a ton of physical traits, but not a lot of the mental side of the game that you're worried about developing, especially when the game speeds up, when he's already struggling right now with the speed of SEC football. But Bill, is there anything else you want to talk about Sellers before we wrap up here?
Yeah, so you guys hit the nail on the head with everything with Sellers. Obviously, being the comp king, I have to come with a comp. Sellers is my number 2 overall player on my big board right now with a comp of Dante Culpepper. Everything we saw with Culpepper in the Minnesota Vikings, you're going to see with Sellers in the NFL once he eventually declares. Another guy, obviously, that I will briefly touch on to keep an eye on. He's got a first-round grade for me, and it's Aiden Childs from Michigan State, because, he has the frame at 6'3", 217. He's got the arm talent, an elusive scrambler. He checks all those boxes in that elite, in that physical trait category that I talked about when I talked about my list at the top of the hour. there's still obviously some question marks with some other things, ball security, a big issue, processing speed just needs to uptick a little bit. But this, for Aiden Childs, this is a Jordan Love-esque quarterback, which my comp for him is Jordan Love, and a guy that, again, I have a first round grade, but he doesn't need to be an immediate starter because I see a runway for Aiden Childs to be a starter in the NFL. But folks, we've chatted for an hour. We talked about quarterbacks in the 2026 class. Let's first off point down to the ticker here at the bottom. You'll see running across, we've got daily draft content. You'll see our schedule. Make sure that you like this video, that you follow the channel, that you turn on the notification bell so you get notified when we go live with daily draft content. Make sure you follow our lovely moderator, Jim, NFL Draft Fanatic, no I in Fanatic, here on YouTube and over on X. You can follow my other lovely colleague, Durst, on X at Durst NFL Draft on X. My other lovely colleague, Owen, over on X at Weekly Huddle. He's also got a YouTube channel, the Weekly Huddle Podcast, that he does a lot of different things on. I've been on there. All of us draft professors have been on there at one point or another, so make sure you go check that out. You can go find me over on X as well at Spark Scouting, as well as I am a writer and analyst for the Right Way Sports Network. That's TWSN.net. Owen, do you have anything else you want to add on these signal colors tonight?
No, I think you grabbed my thunder from grabbing Childs. Me and Bill have talked extensively about how he is just our guy in this upcoming class.
Yes.
Absolutely love him. I'm just glad, and I have to keep this going from when we talked about Oklahoma and the Oklahoma specific breakdown. I am off the John Mateer bandwagon. I'm not. I'm off that. If you guys want to try to chime in and defend him there, but I need to keep up my. I guess I don't want to call it a hate train, but that's just not. That's a not my guy. We talked about my guy and Childs. I had to throw in a not my guy with John Mateer early on in this cycle. That's all my remaining opinions.
Matt Corral 2.0 when I see John Mateer, and I'll leave it at that. Durst, do you have anything else you want to add on these quarterbacks tonight?
Well, I think probably the highest thought of the guys we didn't talk about was Fernando Mendoza, and I have him as a fringe first round pick as well. Technically, I put him at the very top of the second round, ahead of these other guys, ahead of Klubnik and Nussmeier. But there's definitely some things that have me concerned about having him at this point as a first round pick. He was sacked 41 times in 2024, which is the most among the FBS quarterbacks. And sure, yes, Cal's offensive line was horrible, but a lot of offensive lines are horrible in college. He also has a 26.4 pressure to sack ratio, which is a little bit more indicative of raw sack numbers, because that's more of the percentage of times he was pressured, how many times did he actually get sacked. So that's a little bit more of a sticky stack when it comes to quarterbacks versus just how many times were they actually stacked. So so I know Mendoza's got some big fans. Corey Kinnon has him as his number one quarterback, and Nate Tice has him as number one quarterback, at least at the beginning of the process. There's been some comps to people like Matt Ryan and Joe Flacco. But to me, I've got a little bit of apprehension there. I think he's very likely to come out, but I also have him as a top of the second round pick. Anybody else want to touch on Mendoza? Bill, I know you're a big Indiana fan, and
chime in here a little bit. So the main focus of the podcast was to cover really the four highest seniors that we know are in this draft class, right? That we're projecting day one, day two. So if you want to see breakdowns on all of these other quarterbacks, go to the YouTube station. There is a quarterback playlist. Now, you're going to be listening to Durst and Bill and Anthony Russo over and over and over again, because they broke them down with several guests coming on. But they broke down 30 quarterbacks, 4 of which we repeated on this podcast. And then we started throwing in a lot of underclassmen towards the end. So quarterback podcasts tend to get replayed a lot. So I wanted to have kind of like an isolated tutorial, so to speak, for anybody that wanted to know, let's say the 4 quarterbacks they should be paying most attention to are the 4 that we covered at the beginning, because we know they are in the draft class. Klubnik, Alar, Moss, Nussmeier. Those will be the 4 that you definitely want to pay attention to. There's a lot of other names, but if I was a betting man, I'm betting that most of them go back to school. Right. So we will cover quarterbacks extensively once we know who's in the draft class. You better believe that we're coming back in about 5 months, and we're going to be repeating this type of format with every quarterback that's in the draft class. So, but that being said, we have been going for almost 75 minutes. I appreciate the teamwork when my audio is breaking out.
Yeah.
Right. So my audio is cutting in and out. You guys did a great job. So this station would not be operating right now without the 3 of you. The 3 of you really helped this channel out over the summer. So we're going to be in like mid-season form in like September.
Oh yeah. Oh
But,
yeah, we're gonna be ready to roll.
For
Yo,
the
I'm
85
ready.
podcasters at the Draft Professor, for Owen, for Bill, for Durst, give them all a follow. Please and thank you. We will see you on a podcast again tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.